Okay everyone, so here's your video on water pollution. It's chapter 22 in the book. And what water pollution is it's a problem that refers to physical or chemical change in water that adversely affects the health of humans or other organisms. So this isn't limited to just a problem for humans, it can extend to other populations as well. So some types of pollution that we'll be discussing in the chapter are pollution from sewage, eutrophication, waterborne disease, sediment pollution, nutrient pollution, pollution from organics and inorganics, radioactive pollution, and thermal pollution. Okay, so starting us off with the problem of sewage pollution. Sewage pollution, what it refers to is the wastewater from drains and sewers, so that includes wastewater from toilets as well as showers, and that includes human waste. And sewage is created through human activity. High amounts of sewage lead to increased amounts of decomposing bacteria. So sewage, it provides nutrients. That's called the process of enrichment. After an area is enriched, it leads to increased levels of algae and bacteria, and as well as increase in decomposer population. As these populations go up, the amount of cellular respiration that occurs within an area also increases. And as you should know from way back when, cellular respiration is a chemical reaction that animals do to produce energy, and it uses up oxygen. So it's glucose plus oxygen reacts to produce CO2 and H2O. So it's using up oxygen, and as you use up oxygen in an area, it causes the biological demand for oxygen to go up. So we use more oxygen, the competition for oxygen increases. And because that competition for oxygen is increasing, the overall amount of dissolved oxygen within the specific area or ecosystem will go down. Because of that, fish populations as a whole will go down because there's less oxygen available. Obviously, these populations are going to be affected by the decreased amount of oxygen in the water. So this graph, it illustrates the effect of sewage on dissolved oxygen and biological oxygen demand. What happens is right here at distance 0, we have the introduction of sewage. And right at that place where the sewage is being introduced, there's a high biological oxygen demand, which what that means is there's a lot of organisms competing for that oxygen because there's so many nutrients available. They're going to not be limited by how much food they can get, but instead they're going to be limited by the amount of oxygen that's available to undergo cellular respiration to produce energy. And as you get further away from this sewage that's being dumped, what happens is the biological oxygen demand, it goes down because there's less nutrients, therefore they're doing cellular respiration less. But what happens is because of that high demand, the oxygen levels also go down. And once they reach a certain point, you'll have the killing of fish populations. So fish can't exist in areas that have too low of a dissolved oxygen level. But what also happens is eventually as you get further and further away from the sewage spill, like here is 75 kilometers, 100 kilometers, eventually what happens is you'll get far enough away from the sewage that it stops affecting the biological oxygen demand, and the dissolved oxygen will also increase as a result of that. The next major type of water pollution we're going to discuss is eutrophication. Lakes, estuaries, and slow-flowing streams, they can all be classified as either oligotrophic or eutrophic. Oligotrophic bodies of water, they have minimal levels of nutrients. They have good light penetration, which means that the light can go through the water and it can reach the bottom of the watershed fairly easily. It has high levels of dissolved oxygen, meaning that there isn't a large biological oxygen demand. The water is deep. They have low levels of algae growth, mainly because of the low levels of nutrients. And they house predatory fish. So as you can see, there's smallmouth bass, lake trout, pike, sturgeon, and whitefish. And those are all types of fish that feed on other fish. By comparison, eutrophic lakes, which have a problem of enrichment, which means they have high nutrient levels. With these high nutrient levels come poor light penetration, low dissolved oxygen, shallow waters, and high algae growth. Now, the order of this is kind of misleading because the high nutrients, they usually lead to the high levels of algae, and as a body of water gets filled with algae, what happens is it's less likely that light coming from the sun will penetrate down to the bottom of the lake. As you have those high levels of algae, you have more things that are decomposing, doing photosynthesis, which leads to low dissolved oxygen. And because there's all those decomposers decomposing those dead bodies end up at the bottom of the lake, which contribute to the shallow waters. With the whole problem of eutrophication, it refers to enrichment of a lake, estuary, or slow-flowing stream by inorganic plant or algal nutrients, such as phosphorus. It's a natural process caused by a buildup of dead organic matter over time. Artificial eutrophication happens when pollution like fertilizers or sewage make their way into bodies of water in the form of runoff. So the way that would happen is you'd have precipitation on land, and that precipitation would eventually lead to your wetland, and then the wetland would become enriched. These pollutants, they cause microbial populations to explode, and after the explosion of a microbial population, you eventually get that low dissolved oxygen content. So next up is the issue of waterborne disease. Municipal water sources are full of disease-causing agents, so just really any water source, especially one that is untreated, it has the possibility of having waterborne disease in it. These diseases, they can be caused by bacteria, viruses, protozoa, parasitic worms, and other infectious agents. Right here on this slide, I have a list of different diseases that are waterborne, and then the actual thing that causes the disease. So some of these are going to be viruses, some of them are going to be bacteria, some are going to be protists, but all these different things can be given to you because of water. Now, because water can bring about these waterborne diseases, occasionally we go through the process of water monitoring. And water monitoring, what that looks like is someone will go and acquire a water sample from a public water source. Then what is done is called a fecal chloroform test. It's a test that's used to determine the level of E. coli. It's a bacteria commonly found in human waste present in the water. This is done through filtering a specific amount of water using filter paper and then transferring it to a petri dish. So this would be an illustration of that. The petri dishes are then allowed to incubate for a little bit of time, so we let that bacteria grow. Eventually, it will form colonies, and then these colonies are counted. It's generally considered acceptable that you have one colony for every 100 milliliters of water. Sediment pollution is the next major type of pollution that we're going to talk about. Sediment pollution refers to an excess of soil particles settling and accumulating on the bottom of a body of water. It's caused by erosion from forests, farmlands, and other natural areas, degradations of streams, and overgrazing of rangeland. So as these areas of land are more and more used, what happens is precipitation occurs, and that precipitation carries these soil particles into nearby watersheds. Sediment pollution, it reduces the overall light pollution. So in this specific example, this would be an instance of low sediment pollution. There's not a lot of bits of soil in the water, and as a result of that, there's a lot of light that can get through, and algae is allowed to grow because it's able to get that light and then go through the process of photosynthesis to create food. Areas that do have large amounts of sediment, what happens is this soil particles, they end up affecting the amount of light that can penetrate a specific area, and photosynthetic organisms aren't allowed to survive in that type of environment because they're all ultimately dependent on light. The cloudiness of the water and the light's inability to penetrate the water causes an overall reduction in all populations, as the population size of your primary producers really affects how large your ecosystem can grow as a whole. Sediments also adversely affect water quality by carrying toxic chemicals into the water. Sediments adversely affect water quality by carrying toxic chemicals into the water. These can either be inorganic or organic chemicals. Inorganic nutrients, these are chemicals that stimulate plant growth like phosphorus and nitrogen. These chemicals are commonly found in fertilizers, plant and animal waste, and atmospheric depositions. What these inorganic nutrients do is they cause enrichment in an area. We've talked about this previously in this video. It leads to a huge algal population, which eventually causes a great decomposer population. This leads to a huge biological demand for oxygen, which decreases your overall dissolved oxygen, and it kills off fish populations. This can be illustrated through the example of the dead zone, which is in the Gulf of Mexico. What happens is this entire area of land, the Mississippi River watershed, it's predominantly is farmland and agricultural land. And as farmers use fertilizers to help out their crops, what happens is those fertilizers eventually find their ways into streams. These streams eventually connect up with rivers. The rivers eventually make it down their way to the Gulf of Mexico, and all these things end up right off the coast of Louisiana. And because all these fertilizers are essentially all going to the same place, the problem of enrichment occurs on a huge scale. And what ends up happening is there's entire areas of ocean that have horribly low oxygen levels. And these areas are called dead zones because literally nothing can live there because there's basically no oxygen. So the only thing that can survive in those areas are bacteria that thrive on no oxygen environments. This lowering of oxygen, it's called hypoxia. It's caused through the rapid growth or bloom of algae. It's caused by the addition of fertilizers into the Gulf from the Mississippi River. Organic compounds are compounds that are made of carbon. These are naturally occurring like sugar, amino acids, or oils. However, they can be man-made in the form of pharmaceuticals, pesticides, solvents, or other industrial chemicals. The types of problems that organic pollutants have are largely unique to the specific pollutant. So what I did is I included a couple compounds that are examples of synthetic or man-made organic compounds, and then some of the health effects that they cause are listed over on this side of the table. For inorganic compounds, inorganic chemicals, the two main ones that are really bad are both examples of heavy metals. They can also be acids or salts. They are pollutants that do not easily degrade or break down. Largely, when you incur inorganic compounds, they'll often stay with you for the majority of the rest of your life. So they're very hard to get rid of once they enter your body. They're made through industry, mining, irrigation, runoff, oil drilling, and urban runoff. So that's runoff of an urban area like a city such as Chicago.